Welcome to the Constitutional Rights PAC candidate series. As you know, we've done a bunch of these candidate series, and our goal of the candidate series is to get to know the candidates that we believe are worth supporting. We're going to ask them some questions. We're going to give them some opportunity to pitch to you, the donors, the supporters, to contribute to his campaign or not. And we're going to get him on record in terms of where he stands on some very important issues, because too often, and we say this is why we do this series, too often we support a candidate. They tell us one thing in private, that they're going to support A, B, and C, and then they wind up getting to Congress and doing something different. So we want to keep them on camera to make sure that we can hold their feet to the fire when they are elected. So today we have the privilege of introducing Tim Baxter, who's running in New Hampshire's 1st district. It's an R+1 district. It's a district we should win. He's running against Chris Pappas, and he's got a great. You're a young man. You're 23 years old, right? And you got some great background. He's already a member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives. He's an entrepreneur. He founded and operates a business investing in restoring rental properties throughout New Hampshire. Started a nonprofit called Second Chances, which I'm going to let him talk about. And he's also a member of the New Hampshire Freedom Caucus. So thank you, Tim, for joining us, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Larry. And I can certainly understand wanting to get politicians on the record and holding them accountable. That's something I've been doing in the House, and for good reason, because there's a lot of politicians that say one thing and then do another thing. So I'm excited to tell you more about what I believe, and thanks for having me today.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, and I'd like to know more about starting your business and the nonprofit, and anything you think our audience would want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So I first got involved in the community with nonprofits, raising money for nonprofits. And the more I got involved in the community, the more I saw how corrupt politicians were ignoring people, especially those that were the least fortunate among us. And especially as someone that's young, I felt compelled to get involved in our political system to fight back against corrupt politicians. I started a nonprofit called Second Chances to help people that are struggling with addiction get into treatment programs. And then I'm also a small business owner. I'm a landlord. And I like to joke I'm in the same business as Trump, just a little bit smaller. I'm not a billionaire yet.
That's great.
And then I'm a conservative state rep. I'm a member of the Freedom Caucus. And I'm running for New Hampshire's 1st congressional district because, one, we need to fight back against the radical left that is pushing things like vaccine passports, that's spending trillions of dollars, that's jamming this down our country's throat unanimously without the other party's consent. But also, crucially, we can't just fight the left, and we can't just send another weak, spineless rhino to replace Chris Pappas. I will fight the rhino establishment just as hard as I will fight the radical left. And that's why I'm running. As a state representative, I led the charge to stop vaccine passports in New Hampshire. I've fought to protect our Second Amendment. I've worked with grassroots organizations to try to stop voter fraud. And I've also been involved as a member of Ways and Means, cutting taxes and trying to reduce the size of government. So I'm running to bring a principled conservative voice to Congress.
Well, I don't know if you got the memo, Tim, but it seems like at 23 years old, you're a conservative. You're supposed to be liberal at 23. So you didn't get that. You didn't get that memo, especially being from the Northeast. How did you become a conservative or a liberty conservative?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I got lucky then.
Winston Churchill said, back, if you're under 30 and a conservative, you have no heart, and if you're over 40 and a liberal, you have no brain. So, there you have it.
Yeah, I'll say this, especially as someone that's young, I do feel a responsibility to talk to other people my age and say, hey, if you want to start a business, if you want to live the American dream, raise a family, you should be conservative. But I've seen it all. I was taught in the classroom that communism, not like this is my opinion as an economic professor, but this is a fact that communism is superior to capitalism. That's insane. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about stopping things like critical race theory. I support completely defunding critical race theory. Taxpayer money should not be going to brainwashing our children. I'm one of the few, I guess I'm lucky to have not been brainwashed through some of our institutions like the media and like Hollywood and like universities that are pushing their agenda and their ideology on students.
Look, that's why we have you on. Our team does a great job looking for candidates that have this kind of fight and that have this kind of passion to take on these big issues. And you've at such a young age, you've got a record of doing so, and that's important to us. So why did you become politically active? What was the catalyst? Was it always in you?
Well, I was always interested in things like history and politics and economics growing up, but it really was getting more involved in the community, not in a political way, but seeing people in need that are asking their representatives to help them, and they're just completely ignoring them. And then as you sort of look a little closer, it's so apparent, the corruption of politicians. They take away our liberty and freedom to accumulate power and enrich themselves, and that's wrong. I believe we should make government smaller. We should cut taxes. We should cut regulation. We should make sure that we strengthen people's medical freedom and their civil liberties. And so I want to run for Congress to give people back their freedom and to fight for their freedom, not enrich myself. And I just feel such an obligation to do that. With everything going on in our country, I couldn't possibly sit on the sidelines.
Well, let me ask you a tough question right off the bat here. You tell me how you define January 6th.
It's a good question. When I look at January 6th, there's obviously a lot that happened that day, but there is nothing wrong with people objecting to voter fraud in this country. And election integrity is one of the most important issues in our country. Now, everyone should protest peacefully. I want to make that absolutely clear. But as a member of the New Hampshire legislature, I've said that we need to change New Hampshire's voting laws to make sure that we stop voter fraud. I've said 3 specific things that aren't happening right now. 1, you should have to have an ID to vote. You shouldn't be able to show up and not have an ID to vote. Number 2, we have same-day registration. If you're going to register on the same day, at a minimum, you should actually have to prove where you live. And then number 3, if you're a college student that's voting in New Hampshire, you shouldn't be allowed to pay out-of-state tuition. And so you put the onus on the university, and when you start taking away their money potentially, real quick they change their tune, and they'll make sure that no one that actually lives out of state is voting in our elections, which shouldn't be happening. And then in addition to those New Hampshire issues with voter fraud, the For the People Act, which is really For the Politician Act, this bill that they're trying to totally take over state elections. Biden and the Democrat Party would be running elections in a lot of these states, forcing their loose voter laws on every single state. I'm completely against that. And maybe the worst thing about that proposal is it would take millions of taxpayer dollars and give it to every single congressional candidate in the country. We shouldn't be using taxpayer money on political campaigns. So I'm completely against that. And when it comes to January 6th, I believe that voters have a right to demand election integrity and to be against voter fraud.
And absolutely we do. It's matter of fact, it's the proper place for people to redress grievances is at the Capitol, not in the inner cities, burning down businesses and churches and police stations. It's actually going to the Capitol to redress your grievances. And so, it's very ironic to me that the Biden administration just today or yesterday chided and absolutely tried to put Egypt and India on notice for their quote unquote political prisoners that they have. Now, Egypt and India are very good examples of countries that have been allies to America for a very long time. They're chiding them for their political imprisonment. Meanwhile, there's 400 to 500 people from January 6th, peaceful protesters who are sitting in jail right now because the FBI wants to make a statement, and not in great conditions. From what I'm hearing, they're being held in solitary confinement and being treated terribly. So we have really no business. The Biden administration has no business berating our allies at the same time, keeping their own political prisoners in Washington D.C. What would you say to those who were arrested? A lot of them for being led into the Capitol by guards and by people waving them in, saying, "Come on in, it's okay." And now they're sitting in a prison in D.C.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Well, I think one thing in particular that I want to touch on, you said, is about the violence in the inner cities. We saw the Democrats are trying to push this January 6th commission. They want to look into the violence, but they don't want to look into the violence that took place from BLM riots and other forms of mass protests this past summer. That's complete double standard. So anyone that committed violence in a public way, sure, we should look into that. But, just like with BLM riots, too, there were some people that were peacefully protesting. And people that peacefully protested on January 6th shouldn't go to jail. It's just that simple. But we need to be looking into all forms of violence. We shouldn't have a double standard and only look into the day where we're trying to, use that to score cheap political points. So that's what I would say on January 6th.
I appreciate that. So obviously you mentioned critical race theory, and it is a hot topic. I am from Loudoun County, Virginia. I'm sure you've seen our school district in the news. It's horrifying, what the school district is doing here with the critical race theory and the other agendas that they have. But critical race theory is a real important topic. And it's because they're feeding lies to young people to brainwash them, like you said. What can you do as a member of Congress? What will you do as a member of Congress to stop critical race theory from being taught in our schools?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, the Department of Education, which is a federal department, is giving money to states. So for starters, we should say the federal government is not going to fund states' education that is taking critical race theory and shoving it down our kids' throats. We're teaching black kids that they'll never be successful or they're always going to be in a terrible situation because they're black. And we're teaching white kids that they're racist just because of their birth race. That's all insane, and we shouldn't be teaching that at all. So we need to completely defund and stamp out critical race theory from our country. And so at the federal level, we can say that if you're going to be receiving federal dollars for education, that you cannot be teaching critical race theory in schools.
And that's absolutely, well, you mentioned something very interesting, that federal dollars shouldn't be going to state schools anyway, public schools anyway. The federal government has no right to, as a matter of fact, Thomas Massey, one of my favorite member of Congress, is out there every year putting out a bill with one sentence: the Department of Education shall close on December 31st in that current year. And I support that wholeheartedly. But you're right. I mean, there's no reason we should be funding, with federal dollars, any kind of program that supports this lie of critical race theory. And you're up there in New Hampshire, and I know gun rights are important up there, right? It is a big deal. So, but the other side will say, that there are some acceptable limits to the Second Amendment. So what are the acceptable limits you're willing to accept as a member of Congress?
There are no acceptable limits to people's God-given constitutional rights. We shouldn't limit someone's Second Amendment in any way. We should always allow law-abiding citizens to defend themselves and their families. And quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of corrupt politicians telling us which of our God-given rights we should be allowed to keep. It's not up to them. And we need to elect people that are very firm on the Second Amendment. As a state representative, I've worked with grassroots organizations to list build, to build more support, to protect our Second Amendment rights, and to stop Biden gun grabs here in New Hampshire, and then to use those lists so we can identify these people in this district support the Second Amendment, and then go to the representatives in those towns that might be waffling and they might be doing a little bit of this and say, hey, if you don't protect your constituents' God-given Second Amendment rights, you might not get reelected the next election. You might not return to Concord. We can do that at the federal level too. You might not get reelected to Washington, D.C. I will go on the offense protecting people's God-given Second Amendment right.
God bless. Look, and exactly what you said. I tried to throw a trick question at you. You knocked it out of the ballpark. I appreciate that. There are no acceptable limits to the Second Amendment, and you're absolutely right. It's a little sentence shall not be infringed. That's very important. That liberals don't seem to understand. All right, here's a big question. Obviously, we've all lived through, the COVID. Some people call it the COVID hoax. Some people call it the pandemic. Whatever you call it. There were lockdowns. People lost livelihoods. They were forced to wear masks that the health officials before the pandemic said wouldn't do anything. But they were there because they were a symbol of the state's power, in my opinion. Now I'm kind of giving you the answer before, but what do you think are acceptable measures to kind of keep the public safety?
Yeah, well, I'll just start with this. I'm proud to be endorsed by the executive director and the founder of Reopen New Hampshire, which was leading the fight against things like lockdowns here in New Hampshire. I think when it comes to Dr. Fauci, that he should be fired for lying to the American public. He traffics in lies and fears, and he manipulates the public, saying things to try to get a certain political end, not actually giving the information unbiased, like we should expect from someone that's supposed to be the leading doctor in a neutral way. He's an utter disaster and should be fired for lying to the American public. And then with things like vaccine passports as well, I introduced the legislation in New Hampshire to stop vaccine passports. Things as simple as driving or flying, trying to get or keep a job, or something even like going to the supermarket. There's been talk of people requiring a vaccine passport to do those things. No one should be discriminated against because of a medical decision they choose to make or not make. It's no one's business who gets a vaccine or not. It's between you and your doctor, and no politician should get involved in that in any way. That's why I led the fight to try to stop vaccine passports here in New Hampshire.
So let me hear a conversation, like role play a little bit, in terms of you get a knock on your door, and it's someone going door to door to stick you with a needle. How is that conversation going at the Baxter house?
Well, I'm hoping that they're going to skip the Baxter house if they know who I am. That's for sure. But that's totally ridiculous that state money or federal money could be used to try to coerce people into getting a vaccine. Taxpayer money has no place for that. It's utterly ridiculous.
No, I can't agree more. And quite frankly, it's a little terrifying to me that they're going to send. What, who are they going to send doctors door to door? When I first heard the story about North Carolina that they were going to just go door to door, they were going to do a stupid government promotion thing. Hey, you should really get this. No, they're going with the syringe. They're going with the syringe. And what happens if someone gets stuck? Do they have the medical equipment there to support an adverse reaction to the vaccine? None of these things are thought out. It's just how many people we can stick with this thing. And quite frankly, it's horrifying. It's horrifying. So where do you stand on the border?
Yeah, great question. So I support building the wall. I'm completely against illegal immigration. And I'll just give you my immigration policy. I believe in legal, but I'm against illegal immigration. I like to say we should take winners, not losers. If you pay your taxes, if you come legally, if you follow the laws, if you don't commit crimes, you're a winner. But if you're coming here illegally, if you're on welfare, if you don't pay taxes, if you commit crimes, you're a loser, and we don't want you here. It's that simple. I support border security. I'm against amnesty, and we need to stop illegal immigration in this country. And by the way, too, Biden's administration and Kamala Harris, their response to the border crisis, which is a crisis, has been woefully inadequate, and especially with Kamala Harris, completely tone deaf. So we need to completely change our approach to the border and illegal immigration in this country.
You're spot on. I couldn't have said any better. Trump called them, the people coming over criminals, and some of them are rapists, and everyone, chided them for that. You call them losers, which I appreciate. If you're coming to suck off our government teat and to live on welfare, you're not a winner. If you're coming for opportunity, you come the right way. Welcome aboard. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor, what education status is. If you come in with the right attitude, I'm going to take care of myself. I want the opportunity. I'm going to come legally. Come on in. And a lot of people, I was just going to say, a lot of people don't necessarily know there's over 1 million people a year that come here legally, which is the most of any country in the world. And I think, look, if you come through the right way, as you said, you should absolutely have the opportunity to come here. But it's not as if everyone should automatically be allowed to come here. That's a ridiculous system. We're very generous, but the idea that we're going to subsidize illegal immigrants with things like welfare, or that we're not going to enforce our border, we need to stop that. You never hear Democrats talking about is increasing legal immigration. They don't, because they want people coming on and being and having to live in the shadows so that they could use them for their political purposes. So you're very outspoken. I can tell you're a fighter, and I appreciate that. But tell me. Obviously, there's some things like you want, that you say that maybe go over the line, and hate speech. And tell me about how you feel about hate speech, or maybe as the mayor of New York City, De Blasio, says is hurt speech. He's trying to criminalize hurt speech. So if you say something that hurts somebody's feelings, you should go to jail. So tell me how you feel about speech.
Yeah, just like the Second Amendment, I completely support the First Amendment, and not just free speech, religious freedom, which is under attack in this country as well. We need to completely defend the First Amendment on college campuses. I co-sponsored a bill to make it so no one's First Amendment rights are being infringed on college campuses. Sometimes conservative groups have a little bit more trouble than progressive groups to get started or to be allowed to operate on college campuses. So I co-sponsored a bill to work on protecting free speech. But the Constitution is very clear. Hate speech is allowed under our Constitution. And in fact, people need to hear often hate speech to understand how bad it is, and then they can organize against that speech politically. But we shouldn't stamp out speech just because it's unpopular or because one person might deem it as hateful. Who gets to determine what's hate speech and what's not? You spouting your very progressive, your communist, or your very conservative views could be deemed as hate speech by someone else. And that's not right. So I completely support the First Amendment and free speech.
Well, the King George might consider the Declaration of Independence hate speech. And,
exactly.
Quite frankly, it was. They weren't very kind to him, but it was necessary. So the most important question that we ask is, are you pro-life or pro-choice?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I am pro-life, and let me be very clear. I believe that the most advanced country in the world should not kill babies.
Amen. Amen. And it doesn't leave any wiggle room there, and I appreciate that. We have to stand up for the unborn. I mean, that's what the government's there to do, is to protect our lives, protect human lives, and every life is precious. Now, the whole year has been about the lack of law and order, defund the police, and the crime in the inner cities, and I don't know how crime is in the first district in New Hampshire, but I'm assuming it's a little better than Chicago, and Washington D.C. And why do you think that is?
It's a good question. Look at the inner cities and who's been running them the past 50 years. I think this is maybe one of the most harmful things, going back to critical race theory, is when we make people believe that the American dream is dead in this country and that they don't have an opportunity to succeed, to start a business, to live the American dream. We need to give people opportunity, not equal outcomes, but the opportunity to succeed. Things like school choice can improve the quality of education. Things like cutting taxes and cutting regulations and cutting spending makes it easier for people to get a good job and to start a thriving business. So I think progressive socialist policies have failed our inner cities, unfortunately. When it comes to things like defund the police, we should not be defunding the police. The purpose, first and foremost, of a government is to provide national security, is to provide defense and the police. And we need to make sure that our police have the ability to operate safely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So getting into law and order, let's talk about the abuse of law and order when it comes to the surveillance state. How do you feel about the surveillance state, the intelligence communities, and what will you do to kind of rectify some of their abuses?
Yeah, well, when I said at the beginning of this interview that we need to not just fight the radical left, but we need to fight the rhino, weak, spineless establishment, I would throw the deep state as a part of that spineless establishment. And that's what Donald Trump was trying to fight against, was the deep state. And the deep state, they've spied on innocent Americans. They spied on President Donald Trump as well. Just like with the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, we need to protect people's Fourth Amendment as well. And no one should be spied on without a warrant, without cause. So I'm completely against deep state bureaucrats spying on American citizens.
But we have an intelligence bureaus, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, all of these intelligence bureaus that are and basically doing whatever it is that they want to do without consequence. As Chuck Schumer actually said in an interview when Trump finally first took office, he said, you better not piss off the intelligence bureaus because they'll get you, 6 ways to Sunday. They have different ways to get back at you. And obviously it proved very, very true. So as a member of Congress, what will you do? What can you do to neuter these agencies that are out of control?
Well, for starters, I would say the deep state and the rhino establishment, they should be concerned about me because I'm coming for them. That's for sure. We need to hold these agencies accountable, and we need to reduce their power. We need to make it crystal clear in law that the NSA, for example, cannot spy on innocent Americans. Just look at James Clapper. He lied to the American public under oath, and he wasn't held accountable. That's the fault of politicians for not holding him accountable. So we need to elect people that actually believe in our Constitution, that will fight for our Constitution, so we can hold deep state bureaucrats like James Clapper accountable when they lie to the American public and when they violate our constitutional rights.
I appreciate that. Now let's talk about the campaign. Obviously campaigns need money. They need volunteers. Yes, they need boots on the ground. They need strategy. So and without giving away any strategy, tell us about the campaign, who you're running against, who's in the primary against you, why you're the candidate that we should support, and how do you plan to win?
Yeah, great question. Because of redistricting, this is maybe the best Republican pickup opportunity in the whole country. Chris Pappas, politically speaking, is a dead man walking, and he might not even run for re-election. So it's a golden opportunity. This can be one of the 5 seats that flips the House from blue to red. But also, it is a golden opportunity to get a principled conservative elected to Congress. So I'm running as who I am. I'm a conservative fighter. So far, there's 4 candidates that have announced, and there's 2 more. These are Republicans that are about to get in. So that's 6. It's going to be a very crowded field, which I feel like is good for us because we're sticking to our principled conservative message. And I really, truly believe there are more conservatives, there's more patriots out there than there are rhinos. The biggest way to help is to support our campaign financially. Go to baxterforcongress.com and donate. We set an ambitious fundraising goal of raising $100,000 by the end of the first calendar month. No Republican candidate for Congress has ever done that in New Hampshire. And after 3 days, we announced that we had raised already $25,000. So we are on our way to hitting that goal and having a significant amount of momentum, which we're going to need to flip this seat.
Money is important. It really is. Are there any, big funding guys that are running against you?
Not yet, but it is early. We're 13 months away from the primary. There might be a businessman or 2 that self-funds. I'm going to put in some of my own money as well because I'm a business owner, but not enough to fund the race entirely, but a significant, a 6-figure contribution. So we'll see who else enters the race. Right now, I'm the only person with any elected experience so far, so people can see my track record. I have a 97% with the HRA, the House Republican Alliance, which is a constitutional group. So I'm going to stick to my guns and talking about our conservative message and conservative policies and how I will fight for people in D.C.
What's your ground plan like?
Yeah, we're going to run a very heavy grassroots campaign. And we're building a network of volunteers. We're going to knock doors. We're going to make phone calls. We're going to send texts.
Not with syringes, though, right?
What's that?
Not with syringes. You're not going to go and try and stick people in the arm, the door to door, right?
Yeah, maybe if I switch my party affiliation, I'll try that next time. But we're very excited. When you're working against the establishment, I take the attitude that you have to outwork them in every way. We want to raise more money. We want to, every single way we want to outwork them, and that's our strategy.
And getting into the general, even if it's an open seat, the Democrats aren't going to give it up easy. They're going to throw tons of cash at it. How many votes do you think you're going to need to win this election in November?
Yeah, in the general election, it's going to be probably 250,000 or so. So it's a big undertaking. And you're right. Flipping a seat, the Democrats are not just going to go quietly into the night. So we're going to need to build a robust organization. And that's why we've set a fundraising goal that's more than any Republican in New Hampshire has ever done before, because that's what it's going to take to defeat Chris Pappas. Well,
I know I ran a race in Maine. And what we found out was, and Maine is even a little more rural than New Hampshire. But what we found out is TV is important, right? So television is important because not everybody, has lives on the internet like we do down here in Virginia, regular old local and cable TV is super important to sway voters and to bring them out. So you're going to need a big budget. To put a lot of money in television, to put a lot of money on the ground, to reach wide rural areas. Look, you're going to have our support. We are going to contribute to your campaign. We do a pretty good job vetting our candidates before we put them through the ringer here. But I also want you to go and go to Tim's website. It's Baxter for Congress, right?
Yes, sir.
BaxterForCongress.com. Go to his website and contribute directly, or you can come to our website at Constitutional Rights PAC and contribute. If you max out to Tim and you want a place to get more money to him, then you can come to our PAC and contribute to our PAC. It'll be a pass-through contribution. It'll come through Constitutional Rights PAC, there are, and we're going to also help support you in the race as well. Whether that's through TV or internet or a lot of different ways to do that. So give us your pitch. Give us your last-minute pitch. Tell our audience why they should support you.
Yeah, I'll just recap again, and thank you for having me again, Larry. I'm a conservative fighter. I will fight the radical left just as hard as I will fight the weak, spineless establishment rhinos. I've had a principled record as a state representative. I led the charge fighting vaccine passports to try to stop vaccine passports in New Hampshire. I've fought to protect our Second Amendment rights. I've fought to try to stop voter fraud, and I've fought to cut taxes here in New Hampshire. Just look at the federal government, what they're doing. They've passed trillions of dollars of stimulus, and Joe Biden just proposed a $6 trillion budget, the biggest budget of all time, when there's massive inflation going on too. Compare that to New Hampshire, the budget that I helped work on. We cut every major taxes, investment taxes, property taxes, our de facto sales tax. We were the only state in the country that cut spending. And in this budget, we created school choice for low and middle income students. Plus, we got an abortion ban after 24 weeks, all in our conservative budget. These live free or die conservative values, the beliefs in our Constitution, we've got the right ideas here in New Hampshire. We just need a congressman that has the guts to fight for our live free or die conservative values, and that's what I'll do if I'm elected to Congress. Please go, again, to baxterforcongress.com and make a financial contribution to my campaign.
And every dollar counts, whether it's $5 or $500, or up to what the maximum, I guess, is now $5,800 for the primary and the general. So if you're listening and you're a person of means, then go ahead and max out to Tim, because we need more fighters like this. He's a young man with great credentials and a great background, and we look forward to seeing your fight in Congress.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, Larry.
Hey, thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
Constitutional Rights PAC is responsible for the content of this message.